All right. Hello, my name is Dennis Schultz. I am the Executive Director for Blacks in Technology Foundation. Blacks in Technology is a 501c3 nonprofit. We advocate for the advancement and promotion of people of African descent in the tech industry. If this is your first event with us, welcome. We encourage you to participate. We have weekly events scheduled throughout the month of February. So for Black Tech Month, we're Hacking Black History Month. If you aren't a member, I'm going to put the link in the chat to the foundation's website where you can join. It's free. We have a lot of resources for people to upskill as far as training, certifications, and scholarships, and opportunities to give back through mentorships, either becoming a mentor or getting mentored. So with that, I want to introduce our team. For Mediaocean, we're going to talk about exploring the world of advertising and advertising, marketing, and tech. So if you don't mind, Jordan, if you could just introduce yourself and team, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you, Dennis, for the welcome. At Mediaocean, we are the mission critical platform for omnichannel advertising. Today, we're really excited to talk more about ad tech and Martech industries, give you a little bit of insight of what we're doing over at Mediaocean. And as Dennis mentioned, happy to answer any questions that might pop up as well. So you can send those along in the chat, and we'll also have that Q&A session at the end you can raise your hand for. I'll start with the introductions. My name is Jordan Cobbs. I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Talent Acquisition Specialist at Mediaocean out of our Chicago office. My role at Mediaocean is really to work closely with our Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to intentionally incorporate DEI strategy within our hiring best practices. I'm going to throw this over to Brian, if you can introduce yourself next.
Sure. My name is Brian Lawrence. I'm a Senior Business Solutions Consultant. I'm based out of the New York office. My primary role is working with advertising agencies, full service, from their day-to-day needs, strategic needs, as well as managing their feature requests.
Thank you, Brian. Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Michelle Sanayebakhsherad. I'm Director of Quality Assurance Engineering over the Scope suite of products. Our focus on that product line is really on activation optimization of your ad campaigns.
Great, thank you. Godwin, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, so Godwin Joseph, Vice President Strategic Accounts at Mediaocean, looking after some of our agency and advertiser partnerships in EMEA, and I'm based in the UK, as you can probably hear from my accent.
Thank you, Godwin. Justin, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Yes, Justin Gillespie. I'm here based in Chicago. I'm a enterprise sales director. So my role here at Mediaocean is to work with our prospective clients, whether they be agencies or brands that want to utilize our products, whether they be here in the United States or globally. So yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you, Justin. And Matt, last but not least, please introduce
yourself. My name is Matt Schuchhardt. I'm relatively new to Mediaocean, part of acquisition about 6 months ago of 4C Insights, where I was a developer for about 6 years, full stack developer, then backend, then SRE, now I'm doing management. So I'm now a VP of software engineering based in Chicago.
Thank you. So now that everybody knows who we are on this call, let's jump into our first question. So kind of introducing Mediaocean here a little bit. My first question is, what is ad tech and Martech, and how would you describe Mediaocean's position in this space? Justin, I know you have some insight here.
Yeah, so when you think about ad technology and marketing technology, they're definitely two segments of the entire advertising space, but they break down into two different lanes. So when you think about ad tech, you're thinking about the Googles, the Facebooks, the Twitters of the world that have platforms that allow brands or even agencies on behalf of brands to advertise products and solutions. When you look at more of the marketing tech side or marketing technology side, it's more about technology companies and technology solutions that allow brands and advertisers to collect data, create advertising copy or ads, as we call them, on a day-to-day basis, And between those two lanes in terms of advertising technology and marketing technology, these different types of technology allow brands to be able to go to market with their services, with their products, and be smarter about who they're targeting on a day-to-day basis, and utilizing those platforms, whether it be a Google or Facebook, in a very smart way, and automating a lot of what they're trying to do. So when you think about Mediaocean, we are the modern system of record for omnichannel advertising. So not just in the the digital space that we know, like the Facebooks of the world, but also within the connected TV space and the linear TV space. We try to be that solid infrastructure that teams can work across of, whether it be media planning, activation, planning, buying, and measurement of campaigns.
Thank you. Work smarter, not harder, right? That's what we're all about. Brian, would you like to add anything kind of from a different perspective here?
Yeah, just a slightly different perspective. When we talk about Mediaocean, it may not be a household name for most of you, but you have seen a product of our work. We have a dominant position in the marketplace. Over $150 billion flows through our software. To give you some scope in terms of what we have to offer and our role that we play in advertising. Last year's Super Bowl, there was, I believe it was like 94.7% of the commercials that you saw during the Super Bowl flow through our system. So we are truly, in terms of globally, in terms of the advertising space, we do have a dominant position.
Great, thank you. So we've been in this game of ad tech and Martech for a while now. And I know several people on the call have also been in the industry for a while. So I'm curious, what has changed in the past 5 years? What do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10 years? And what are some of those historic or current challenges that we're facing in ad tech and Martech? Brian, would you like to start us off here?
Yeah, there's been a few changes over the past 5 years, I'd say. 5 years ago, the focus was primarily on digital, and we were still, for the most part, participating. When we considered advertising, we were looking at an old format, if you will. We looked at digital, we looked at TV, we looked at radio. But if you think about it, those two, the last things I mentioned, those are actually devices. So what we've seen over the past 5 years, and we'll see going forward, is that we're now looking at media and advertising in media more from video, audio perspective, because the platforms are moving more and more towards digital. So over the next 5 to 10 years, the challenge would be to incorporate all of the new data that we have in place, because on the digital platform, you can capture more data and target audiences. So that's going to be a challenge. We also have a challenge in terms of managing all of that data in the process, and we'll see more and more innovations with our software. And all of this is in response to how the consumer is consuming media. No longer are they're corded up, if you will. People can watch things wherever they want, and thus their ads wherever they are. So the big challenge going forward, I feel, will be to keeping up with innovations, keeping up with the many ways that people consume media, understanding that, and being able to understand the large amount of data that we now have. So those are the things that I think will be the most challenging over the next 5 to 10 years.
Sure. Godwin, do you have anything to add on to that, or maybe some other things that you've noticed?
Yeah, sure. No, so if I look back to 2015, I think, what was the hot topic then? What were people talking about? And people were talking about, the shift of from desktop to mobile. That was actually, in 2015, so it wasn't that long ago. And at that point, most of the searches on the internet online were done on a desktop device. And that shift really happened. I think it happened really at the beginning of 2016. And since then, we've seen a 200% increase in the number of searches or the usage on mobile devices. Right? Desktop search is still obviously very important for the banking, travel, real estate, and the automotive industry. But mobile was a key thing. And we've seen that trend continue and even accelerate over the last year. If we look at social media and we look at Instagram, for example, Instagram in 2015 had 400 million followers. It's a lot, right? Now they have over 1 billion unique individual kind of users on Instagram today, and that's continuing to grow. And social media in itself is evolving, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that later. So 2015 also saw the rise of social media companies housing content over traditional publishers, with the inception of Apple News, Facebook Instant Articles, Google's accelerated mobile pages. And they became almost publishers, right, in their own right. So what we've seen is that they've had a bunch of challenges which over the years they've tried to figure out ways to overcome. And most recently, with Twitter announcing their new civic integrity policy this month, actually, where users can't use their services for the purpose of manipulating or interfering with elections or civic processes, etc. Facebook have an oversight board that they've introduced as well. So really, seeing those in the last sort of 5 years, we've really seen them take control and take a bit more responsibility of what gets published on their platforms. As we enter 2020, the media world finds itself in a significant turning point, right? Politically, economically, technologically, and socially, right? With all the changes, and a lot of that was accelerated last year. But if we now fast forward to where we are today and what's going to happen in the next 5 years, I think there's a lot of change, and a lot of that was accelerated like last year, mainly because of the pandemic. But we're seeing a massive amount of activity in the esports arena. So I think that's going to be really big for advertising. There's about over $20 billion worth of mergers, acquisitions, investments in esports and online gaming. So that's going to be huge in the 5 years. For the second part of your question, in the next 5 years, connected TV is going to continue to grow. So since April, we've seen a huge surge in people, subscribing to these platforms, Disney, Netflix, Amazon, and really, consuming content on connected TV. Another big growth area is social media platforms. So we've seen a lot of growth around, TikTok, Triller, OnlyFans, and these social media platforms have a very, significantly different business model to social media platforms of 5 years ago. For example, OnlyFans have a phenomenal model of connecting consumers with their favorite celebrity and charging them a subscription for that, and then passing a load of that onto the actual and celebrity. So they've got a very interesting business model there. So I think those are ones to watch out for. And then finally, I'll say digital audio, so podcasting. I think it's going to be huge. We saw a slight dip in podcasting in the summer last year, mainly because people have been trapped in lockdown, and suddenly they've got the ability to go out, so they're not going to be sitting at home listening to podcasts. But overall, over the course of last year, we actually saw a 20% increase in podcast activity. So that's another sort of line of advertising channels to look out for. So I think that's really my personal predictions for the next 5 years.
Thank you, Godwin. Change seems to be the running theme here, right? I think my head's spinning a little bit trying to keep up. So I appreciate you both sharing your insight there. Matt, would you like to add on here at all? I know Matt and Justin had some, talking about changes or any challenges that are in the industry right now.
Certainly, thank you. So honestly, what I've seen is that there's a much bigger focus on trying to actually analyze how effective the advertising is. The end goal of advertising is obviously to make your business do better, but when you're not actually measuring the effectiveness of how your advertising is doing, sometimes you see these crazy multi-million-dollar ad campaigns that are based on not a ton more than just feel. So it's a really tough sell for a company that's trying to make money. So honestly, this is all kind of brand new to me. Before I worked in ad tech, I had just assumed that when you ran an ad, you immediately knew a couple days later how much money it made you or how well it did. And that's not really at all the case. And particularly on the technology side of things, it's not just interesting from a business perspective, but there's a lot of very interesting problems that come with this, trying to separate out the cause from the effect of different ad campaigns and things along those lines. So it's, I guess, academically speaking, a really interesting sort of problem to work on.
Yeah, and the only other thing that I'll add, just from my personal background, coming from the agency side and then transitioning more into tech, is that I think a lot of teams that we work with, especially in the agencies, 5 or maybe even 10 years ago, we're still planning out their media and campaigns in silos. So what you're seeing now, just because the consumer has more of a unified experience and a consolidated experience, is that, you know, more of those teams are planning in a more consolidated fashion and cross-channel to ensure that the consumer has a consistent message across, whether it be Facebook, Google, Twitter. So, you know, I think you'll continue to see that happen. You continue to see a lot of consolidation. And when you think about planning, for instance, especially more thoughts around how can we plan cross-channel, especially.
I like that.
Just to add one more point. Sorry, just to add one more point to that. I think if there's anything 2020 has taught us, just building on those points, right, is that, you know, uncertainty is inescapable. And as consumers evolve, and I think we said this earlier, as consumer habits evolve, right, you know, we're going to see an accelerated change in the industry to be more consumer centric, right? And marketers need to market the way consumers consume. So I think just there's going to be a lot of change, but I think we are better prepared for it coming out of 2020.
Excellent. Great. So I know we were just talking about kind of trends and what we've seen in the industry. I'd like to make a little bit of a shift here. I know when we talk about working in tech, a lot of people, you know, for me, for example, being in the HR department, might not think about the different kind of opportunities there are working in tech if you are not maybe a technical person. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. I know, Brian and Justin, that you both are, you know, in the client side and then on the sales side, obviously client side as well. So I'd like to hear what you have to share here.
Yeah, when I first arrived at Mediaocean, if you will, I knew very little about the tech industry. And from my perspective, it was primarily coding and those sorts of things. But what you'll find in this space is that there are a number of different roles and positions that can be held, and you can even transition from various departments. So, for example, I work in client service currently, but through the years I've worked in product. I've also worked with QA, and I've managed a training team. So I'm not, and this is anecdotal, of course, but I'm not sure if when people think about a tech company, they think of it from the perspective of client service, from training, from other aspects of the overall industry.
Yeah, and then I would just add in terms of my background. So as I mentioned before, I came from the agency side. I used to lead performance media within an agency. And I think the one thing that did prepare me to transition more into the tech space within ad tech or Martech is the relationships and also the knowledge that I was able to gain from my ad tech or Martech partners. So when I came to 4C and now Mediaocean and took a client success role, I had already been in client success and client facing roles. So it was more of an easier transition in terms of understanding that your goal is to make sure that your clients are happy, that their campaigns are successful, and that you're helping them meet their goals. So I think in that way, that transition was a little bit easier for me. And then transitioning more into sales role as of this past year was, I would say, it's a little bit more challenging, but at the same time, your goal is to, show the value to your clients, show them why your technology is going to change their lives or their clients' lives. And then I think the great thing about being in a client success or even a sales role is that you have the ear of the clients and you have the ear of the market. So you're able to translate and bring back a lot of feedback to a product or engineering team in terms of how we can continue to improve our platform and kind of provide enhancements into the roadmap for our platform as well in our product. So I think it's a really great space to be in, even if you're non-technical, because you can still influence the platform as the quarters and years go by.
I think what I've gathered after having conversations with all different departments being, in the HR world, is that everything is connected, like you were saying. And I love that about Mediaocean. I know we just were kind of talking about the non-technical roles, but I'd like to hear from Matt a little bit on, from the technical side, maybe what are some of those exciting pieces working in ad tech, specifically ad tech and Martech, to the technical roles that might stand out from other industries?
Yeah, honestly, I think that one of the coolest parts about ad tech is simply the fact that there is such a broad exposure to different technologies. It really kind of runs the spectrum. Like you get things like big data processing and warehousing, UX design, like on the complete opposite end of things, lots of modern web app paradigms and stuff being thrown around like that. Even starting to see more and more like machine intelligent type projects get taken on by typical ad tech companies. And I don't think that's the case in most industries. Like there's a lot of industries where you might get exposure to one or two of those different paradigms, but it's just not as broad as ad tech is a lot of times. It's very quick moving and modern typically when you start seeing these paradigms get thrown around, which is really, really great just for a resume building perspective. And I think particularly with Mediaocean, it's really nice that it intersects with a ton of different ad tech companies, and ad tech is doing more and more of this recently regardless. But like if you look at the list of different partners and companies that we integrate with, like you have the big ones like your Facebooks, Twitters, Amazon, Snapchats, LinkedIn's, all of those we deeply integrate with already. But really any ad tech company that's worth its salt right now has just a massive list of other companies that they integrate with and work with day to day. So it's really, really interesting, I think, from that perspective as well.
Thank you, Matt. That leads us right into our next question, which I know Godwin has some insight to share. Curious about, ad tech crosses into so many different industries and isn't unique in the tech space because of that. So curious, Godwin, if you have any insights or trends that you would like to share in this regard.
Yeah, certainly. I think there's two things I'd probably like to share. So looking back at 2020, right? So I think technology is an integrated part of pretty much every business, right? Every business in every industry. Now, unfortunately, ad tech and the space we work in, we get to see all of these verticals. So FMCG, tech, automotive, etc. And we get to see a gauge of how they're performing, how they're spending on advertising as an indication of what the direction their business is going in. So last year we really saw the FMCG companies hold up fairly well in terms of their ad spend, in terms of their own growth and their market capitalization. Tech companies and e-commerce shot through the roof. We saw what happened with Amazon's share price, and I think that trend is here to stay. I know some marketers are thinking, well, what happens when we get back to normal? Do things settle down? Do these trends stop and do a U-turn? But I think that the trend of e-commerce and people shopping online is here to stay. I think last year we saw, I think about 60 or 70% of all e-commerce transactions happen on a mobile device, right? So that's the direction consumers are going in. And the automotive industry, again, interestingly, there was a lot of ad spend in the automotive industry, and a lot of emphasis on that was vehicles and I guess keeping up with Tesla. Tesla have done a fantastic job. I wish someone had told me to buy some Tesla stock at the beginning of last year, but Tesla have done a fantastic job with Elon Musk, and I'm sure the other automotive companies will follow. And in travel and entertainment, we've seen that sort of take a big hit as a result of the pandemic. But I'm pretty confident that travel and entertainment will kind of re-emerge much stronger. Probably in a different form as we figure out how people travel and how the vaccine affects travel, etc. So we kind of get some very interesting insights across these industries. In addition to that, we get some interesting insights about what happens when brands decide to cut their advertising budgets, when there's a financial crisis or a pandemic. And there were some interesting studies that I think Kantar put out last year that showed, some brands who continue to invest in advertising continue to see a return on investment, and particularly it's around the creativity around the message that was being portrayed. So, there were some brands who decided to just continue advertising, and they they saw a returning an investment that was fairly flat. Some brands decided to change their messaging, right? Really pivot and say, right, we're here with you, we're all in this together, but nothing really material coming out of that. And again, they saw a return on investment a little bit more, but not quite at a peak. And other brands who decided, actually we're going to change our creative messaging and show that we're going to do something really tangible. And more speaking from a UK and EMEA perspective, but I'm sure it was similar in the US. We saw that the engagement that consumers had with those brands was a lot deeper and richer than some of the other types of messaging that was out there. So yeah, we definitely get some very interesting insights in various verticals. And I think what a lot of marketers and agencies have just kind of want is really clarity, consolidation, because if you think about social media, there's so many platforms out there. And I think Justin was saying earlier on, how do you get one cohesive standard set of measurement across all of these platforms, right? They all offer something slightly different. They all operate in a slightly different way. How do you get some consistent measurement? So clarity, consolidation, consistency, I think is something that most brands are saying, right? How do we get this? Right? How do we do this? How do we bring the kind of omnichannel marketing together and effectively report on our results?
Great, thank you. The 3 C's, huh?
I made it up on the
It was excellent. Wonderful. So this, I know we've kind of touched on some of these things already, but my next question is, what are some of the benefits or perks about working in ad tech or Martech that maybe the general public may not think about? I know that, we talked about how it crosses over so many different industries. You can be non-technical and work within, and kind of explore some different areas, and everyone's working together. Brian, I know you have some insight to share here.
Yeah, if nothing else we learned from COVID is the fact that we can work remotely. And just the nature of ad tech lends itself to being able to do that. And that's probably the biggest perk that you'll find with working in ad tech, in that you have a really good work-life balance. And that's something that you may not find in other industries as readily as you would find in ad tech.
I know, and being in talent acquisition, that's one of the number one things that people tell me when I ask, what are you looking for in your next role? So I'm glad they're interviewing with us then.
I'll probably just add on to that as well. When we look at our clients and the industry at large, I think anyone in the tech industry or in this kind of rapidly evolving industry, we saw last year as overnight people had to work from home, and how does that happen? We had some clients who have thousands and thousands of people that they had to coordinate working from home in multiple regions. And what we found is that the ability for us to adapt to doing that was very, very easy. And part of that is because we've had that flexibility, certainly in our industry, of allowing people to work from home, having that connectivity, having the technology that, the internal infrastructure and technology that enables us to do that. So certainly that was that made that transition for us to being in the office to home a lot easier. Obviously, it comes with other challenges like the social aspect and having the right setup. If you don't have the right space, but certainly from a technological standpoint, we were very easily able to support our clients working from home and that transition. But there's those are benefits working in this industry before the pandemic. I think that having those benefits in place really helped us to pivot and be able to almost, from day one, be able to support our clients in a way that our clients needed to be supported.
Yeah, I will also add that a few things. I think ad tech and Martech, when it comes to people, I think we're kind of a special case, and I would even say for the technology sector, just overall, I think we lead a lot with empathy, which you kind of don't find in a lot of different industries or sectors. And what I mean by that, I think with the example that I mentioned before about being able to provide, market feedback to product and engineering, I think it's oftentimes that there can be conflicts in terms of different teams and, knowledge and sharing that knowledge. And I think in technology and technology companies, and especially in ad tech and Martech, we all work towards one goal here. So I think, if something that I know can benefit Michelle or Matt, it's only beneficial to myself or to Brian or to Godwin for me to share that information with them, because it helps them become better too. So I think, we definitely empathize with each other. We make sure that we are, sharing the knowledge that we have, and it helps everybody kind of step their game up in terms of their knowledge and how they, go about their daily lives. I will also say that, working in ad tech and Martech, you work with some really, really smart people, and sometimes that can be intimidating, but it also can be a personal challenge to you as well. So I take it, I look at that every day. I learn something from my coworkers on a daily basis. So that's something that I enjoy. And then lastly, I would just say that because we work across a number of different industries, you have the opportunity to learn about how other industries, like whether it be auto, QSR, how they operate. And you can use that knowledge that you have to become an expert in that industry. So I think there's a lot of different opportunities because ad tech and Martech touch so many different industries in the world.
What you just said resonated so much that it can be very intimidating because you're working with so many smart people, but a personal challenge. I think that to myself, I think about once a week since starting at Mediaocean in 2018. That just really resonated with me. Wonderful. Great. So my next question, this is, I love this question. I can't wait to hear what everyone has to say, or whoever would like to participate. What piece of advice would you have for someone starting out in ad tech or Martech in your respective area or just generally? I'd love to hear, because I know we probably have some people that are exploring this area, maybe interested in starting a career here. Michelle, would you like to kind of start us off?
Sure. I think that on the engineering side, most folks didn't come into ad tech from a background in marketing or advertising, whereas oftentimes on the sales or CS side, they might have agency backgrounds or other experience in the industry. So I guess the advice I would give for somebody in QA or development is to not be intimidated if you don't have a background in advertising. Kind of going back to what Justin was saying, there are always going to be people in this industry who are happy to share their knowledge with you and ramp you up and get you up to speed. And it's actually a really great place to kind of pick up in your career because it does go across so many industries. And then I would also say this isn't necessarily specific to ad tech, but I think it's so valuable to have a mentor or at least somebody in your field or in your team that you can look up to and that will give you real candid feedback, somebody that you respect and can help you grow in your career. I think that that's been probably the single most valuable aspect of my time with Mediaocean and 4C. It's having people to learn from.
I hope Brian doesn't mind me saying this, but I participate in the mentor program here at Mediaocean that we have, and Brian was my first mentor. I was really happy to have him as my mentor, coming from a completely different background and not knowing anything about the ad world. He taught me so much. So that just really resonated with me when you said that, Michelle.
Thanks.
And I know Matt, you might have something to add here as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in a little. I have a few, so I guess I'm just going to give some unsolicited life advice to 100 strangers here. So I guess, first of all, in technical roles, don't assume that everyone's like married to their tech stack that they've built. A lot of times what happens is no one wants to change anything because they assume that it was done that way intentionally. I think you see a lot of in the other direction, a lot of self-loathing about some of the stuff that engineers have built over time. And typically, if you go into something, you're like, this is not good. Can we fix this? You're not going to get thrown. It's not going to get thrown back in your face. But on the other hand, people are probably going to go out of their way to try to actually help you most of the time because they want it fixed too. So yeah, definitely go out of your way to try to fix things that you find broken and talk to people about things like that. My second one is to pursue hard work, but don't fake it until you make it. You hear the advice to fake it till you make it a lot of times. So try new stuff, do hard things, but when you run into a problem, just like have people explain stuff to you. For so long, I went through life just pretending that I guess I knew what I was doing, for better or for worse. But if you're confused about something, or like during a technical talk or something like that, if you're confused, 95% of the time, it's not you. Everyone else is confused too. So definitely don't be afraid to, just ask for help or ask questions about stuff, because it's just a hard skill to build up over time. And I guess my last one is not ad tech specific, or not ad tech or even tech specific, but if you appreciate someone or something or anything like that, just say so. Like for instance, I don't know, like if you feel like someone did a good job at something, let them know. It feels good to feel good. If you like their hat, say you like their hat. It doesn't pay to like be fake or disingenuous at all, but and I mean, no one likes a schmoozer, obviously, but anything you can do to just like be candid with people and appreciate them, I think goes a really long way. This one, I guess, also didn't come naturally to me, and I don't think comes naturally to a lot of engineers a lot of times. Like for context, my family is one of those families where people don't really cry at funerals, so we're a little closed off a lot of times. But I think it's just a really good skill to exercise. Just be genuine about that sort of thing. And I think that's all I have.
I think that's great. I think that kind of brings us back to the comment Justin had said previously of leading with empathy. And I appreciate that you're putting that out into the world. I think being our true selves at work is very important. So being able to just say when you appreciate something is making not only somebody else's day, but it probably is like, okay, I made that connection today. Matt, I do have a follow-up question really quick. If just thinking of maybe some people that might be on this call that are new in their careers or recent graduates or soon to be graduating, is there anything you would give as far as trying to build up that confidence to just ask, or to just, put out there, hey, this doesn't work great, can we fix it? I wasn't sure if there was anything, any advice, like I guess one further piece of advice there of how to do that.
Yeah, honestly, I'm a huge proponent of, I've heard it called a few things, but I've heard it called the T-shaped skill curve. And the reason that I'm a proponent of this, and I guess just take a step back, it's essentially like become an expert in one or three things, and like become the person that's just the go-to contact for everything around that. And it doesn't have to be like some world-changing thing, but like just some very specific area, just become the expert in that. And then the T-shaped part, so like that's the tall part of the T. Then the other part of the T is just get like broad exposure to a lot of things. No one can be an expert in everything, but try to get broad exposure. And the reason that I think that this helps you go out of your way to ask questions is because if you do consider yourself an expert in something, and again, it doesn't have to be like you're the expert on all computers, like some very specific topic within whatever industry or position you're in. But once you become that expert, like it becomes okay to not be an expert in everything, and you can start offering advice sort of in that direction. So I think that helped me sort of break out of that shell a little bit personally.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I've never heard of that, so I'm going to be looking into that after our call today.
If I can just add one.
Oh yes, please do.
I completely agree on that. Find one specific and then broaden that T-shape. I've not heard of that before, so that's pretty cool. I will use that and maybe even take credit for it. But no, so one suggestion I have is really around the mentorship. I know Michelle mentioned mentoring, and I think it's very important to know that your mentor doesn't have to be someone that you have to speak to every week or talk to every kind of day or whatever. I found that I was fortunate enough to have a mentor in my father and a mentor in people close to me, but also a mentor in people that I didn't really get to know. I'd met a few times, but didn't get to know, and just followed their career path, right? And looked at some of the things that they did and some of the mistakes that they made, and some of the great things that they did. So I think you've got to follow specific people, especially if you're focused on a specific industry, whether it's technology, whether it's advertising. Really hone in on some of the people that you think have done a fantastic job in that space. For example, if it was Microsoft in 2000s, you may follow Steve Ballmer or someone like that. Or if it's advertising, you may follow one of the CEOs of the advertising companies, just to kind of see how they operate, the focus that they have. Whether if you go back to 5 or 10 years, where their focus was making sure they get the right balance between digital and linear and digital and traditional, and what they were doing actually within the organization to push that. I think that's a really good place to start. It really gets you kind of understanding their mindset and understanding the industry. And I think the most, and also just being intentful, do whatever you do it with great intent. And the final piece, which nobody ever says, but like, have fun. Right? You got to have fun with what you do. If you're not having fun, it's going to be boring. It's going to be a day-to-day thing. You're going to want to finish at 5 o'clock and say, right, I'm done. But if you're having fun with it, it becomes almost a hobby, like almost natural, and you'll probably be better at it and be more successful. So I think just make sure you're having fun with whatever you do.
I love that, Godwin. Be intentful and have fun. Sometimes as adults, we get a little too serious sometimes, right? So I love that advice. Wonderful. I know we have a few more questions we'd like to get through, and we want to leave some time for Q&A at the end. So I will get into my next question. So after the panel today, for those that are new to ad tech, Martech, don't know much about the industry, where can someone go to find some more information, take a deeper dive into ad tech? I know, Justin, you have some resources here.
Yeah, so the one thing that is cool about our industry is that we're never short on things to read, places to go to find more information. So there are a number of things that I can rattle off that you can use to find out more about ad tech. These are just a few things that I read on a weekly basis. So Ad Exchanger is always great. It's a forum and mostly like a blog that has a lot of contributions around the ad tech space, whether it be news, things that are coming up from these specific companies, Digiday, Martech series, Media Post, but also Ad Age. So Ad Age is basically like the newspaper of our entire industry. So I would even start there and then get into more of the specific blogs that I mentioned before. But you can definitely find out, just from following people on Twitter, as Godwin mentioned, whether it be like the CEOs of the major ad tech spaces, a lot of the columnists in these blogs and posts are also on Twitter. I would follow them and just kind of get their perspective on who they're talking to, the stories that they're printing, just because you can get a really good breadth of knowledge across the entire industry. But yeah, definitely start with Ad Age and then, work your way into those other blogs that I mentioned.
Great, thank you. All righty. So my next question, what is a common misconception people have about ad tech or Martech, and how can we combat these to communicate more effectively? Michelle, would you like to share?
Sure. So I think when I talk to other people outside of the industry, I kind of get two ends of the spectrum about advertising. On the one end, I think some folks think that, we're still kind of in the Mad Men era, or it's a very kind of archaic industry and it hasn't really had a lot of innovation. And then on the other side, then, you have especially on the digital kind of data ingestion thing. And I think people think it's a little bit creepy or invasive or on the far end of the spectrum, maybe nefarious. And what I love to tell people is it's very much neither of those things. It's a very innovative industry. We're solving some really complex problems. And the reality is neither those of us in ad tech nor agencies nor brands want to show people ads that they don't want to see. I mean, the goal is to actually get the right messages in front of the right people and make sure that the things you're seeing are much more relevant to you, and they're things that would actually benefit you. So I think those are things that I'd like people to understand a bit more about the industry.
For sure.
I would just also add, funny story, a common misconception. Usually those come from like your parents. And so my dad, the first time I took him to my office, he noticed that we had like a bar. And he said, "You guys drink like every day and like just drink at the office?" And I was like, "Yeah, sometimes, but not like every day." Because I think from his background and working in construction for like 30 years, that was like a no-no. But, I think, we have a good time at work, but we don't take it, too far. At least we try not to. But I think those are just common misconceptions that we kind of are lazy. We wake up at 10 o'clock and only work for a couple of hours here and there. But as Michelle mentioned, like we're really kind of solving some very complex challenges. Our clients are asking us to do bigger and better things on a day-to-day basis, and want us to respond to those things pretty quickly. So, we're usually juggling a lot of things all at one time. So we have to be great multitaskers, great communicators, and go above and beyond for our clients. So I think it's more than what people see. I think people, a lot of people think that we're just on the couch on our computers all day, but it's definitely a 9 to 5 and sometimes after 5 job that we're doing.
I was going to say, as you were saying that, I was like, wow, people think that. I've never heard that, but that also speaks to how I've only been, with Mediaocean since 2019. But I know that our colleagues are some of the hardest working people I've ever worked with. So for sure. Great. And then I have one last question before we can get to, our Q&A, if there's any questions in the audience. But our last question, I wanted to ask about DEI initiatives. So I know with corporate America shifting when it comes to DEI and conversations in the middle of the pandemic last summer, how we saw the different companies handling these conversations around the national uprising in the US and kind of how companies responded and, everything that's going on in this world as far as that goes. So I'm interested to hear if anyone, maybe Michelle, if you want to share some experiences or observations that you've seen as a shift in emphasis on DEI in corporate America. And I'd also be interested to hear from Godwin, being in the UK, like that, looking at the bubble from the outside as well.
Yeah, I feel like in the last few years, I've definitely seen some changes just in the conversation around DEI and making sure that there's ongoing training. I know that's been something that Mediaocean and then 4C previously as well both did internally to make sure everyone was having that at the forefront of their their mind and work. Within the last year, and especially with things that happened in the US last spring and summer, I think one of the really interesting things that I saw was corporate America moving away from neutrality. Previously, with a lot of companies, there was a sense of like, I don't want to speak on political issues or, quote unquote political issues. And I think for a lot of us, as being representatives of those companies, that didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel right because we were all having these conversations amongst ourselves. But we'd have, when you're an adult, the vast majority of your day is spent at work and with your colleagues. So I've been really excited to see companies taking a really strong stance on this and really making their positions known. There's been a lot of focus on giving back and amplifying underserved voices. One thing that I know that we're doing at Mediaocean that I am really excited to see is kind of removing any kind of identifiers on for applicants and candidates, and making sure that we're having getting rid of any unconscious bias as much as we can. Obviously, that's always going to be a problem. The other thing that and this is a benefit to working for a global company, is that as it was all happening, I live in Seattle, so it's been, in the United States, but I work with some people across the globe, in India and Singapore and the UK, and hearing their perspectives and seeing how involved they were getting into it. That was another change, I think, is that it was really, really amplified as a global issue, which I think is super important.
For sure. Yeah, and speaking of being a global issue, Godwin, do you have any, I guess, just any perspective you'd like to add here?
Yeah, sure. I'll be quick, then I'm sure we're almost at time. But I think just layering on to what Michelle was saying. So I think a lot of what we saw last year was an acceleration in companies really taking a stance and taking a firm step forward. And we've always had an ESG rating, right? Or companies have always had an ESG rating. So that's environmental, social, and governance rating, right? But there was an article written last year in the fall, was that there's growing evidence that ESG policies and practices within companies are having a positive impact on the company's financial performance and long-term business strategy, as well as attracting and retaining the best talent. And one thing I can say, being at Mediaocean, is for a long time now, not just last year, but one of our core values have always been diversity, inclusion, and empathy. Right? And that's so being within Mediaocean is sometimes you look at it and think, like, oh my God, aren't people doing this? Because it's something that we've been doing for quite some time now. But the events of last year, unfortunately, have happened, and has actually caused companies to really take a front line on this. And we've seen many company CEOs really speak up and say, we're not just going to talk about this, we're going to take actually tangible action and make this happen. And we're actually seeing it with our clients. We're seeing it within our organization, which I think is fantastic and very reassuring. And I'd like to leave you with just one quote from Mark Reed, WPP. He said, each time a person stands up for an ideal or act to improve lots for others, or strikes out against injustice, he sets forth a tiny ripple of hope. So each and every one of us can really make a difference, and I think that's part of that's part of what we need to do. That's part of the way we need to move forward for the greater good. So I was really pleased to hear that from someone like him in the industry, and many others have followed suit and doing the same thing. So it's very, very promising.
Thank you so much for reading that quote. What a great way to kind of tie off our chat here. So I do want to, I know we have about 6 minutes left before our scheduled end time. So I think Dennis is checking for questions.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand and I'll open up your mic to talk. Not everyone at once.
We must have answered so many questions already. Great job, team.
Yeah, so if there aren't any questions, I will just let everyone know that if you were having issues joining, I know we maxed out early in the session, this will be placed on our YouTube channel for playback sometime within the next 24 hours. So you can visit the Black's Technology Foundation website and you'll be able to access the full recording if you missed anything.
Great. Oh, and Dennis, if we can go to the next slide, I just want to put out there for anyone else that is still on the call. We do have several openings for anyone that was interested in joining this call because they would like to start their career in ad tech and Martech. We have several openings right now, and I know that's always going to be happening always, and we will have more openings in the spring as well. You can send your resume and maybe where you might be interested in applying for a job to our morecruiting@mediaocean.com, or you can check out all the openings we do have currently at our careers page on the Mediaocean website.
Thanks. So we'll give another 30 seconds or so if anyone may want to ask a question. I think this is the first session that I've had where nobody's had a question. That's impressive. So I will want to say thank you to all the attendees, and thank you for all of our panelists at Mediaocean. I do appreciate your time and energy throughout. If anyone does need to reconnect with either myself or someone from Mediaocean, feel free to reach out to us. And other than that, have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Good day.